Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi, Trent, and welcome to the Stress Podcast. I'm really excited to have you today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's my pleasure. And the first thing that I always ask my podcast guests is tell us a little bit more about where you are located, what you've been up to today, and what time zone you're in.
Yes. So I'm in Michigan, so Eastern time zone, and I live just north of Detroit.
Nice.
Yeah. And what I'm up to today actually is I've just finished launching a new program. So I'm I'm sort of breathing today a little bit and having this new program launched and looking forward to, finding better conversations and more conversations around the people that need the content.
Okay. What kind of a program is it?
It's a program for kids. So it's called Fire Up Your Brain for Kids. And it's a program to help kids with focus and homework and stress and anxiety.
Wow, that's amazing. All right. So I have so many questions for you, but the first thing that I think would be really helpful to learn more about is just about you and who you are and what you've been up to over the last couple of years.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell you, what I really do is I specialize in making brain performance fun and accessible.
Mhm.
And so often it's not fun and it isn't very accessible. And what I've seen, especially over the last year with everything that people are dealing with lockdowns and all the screen time and all the stress and anxieties, there's a really big need to make this work accessible. And so I'll tell you my story, and then that will give you a really good sense of like the foundation for my 25 years of doing this work.
Okay.
So, I'll start with college because I went to college to study dance and went on to become a professional dancer. But while I was in college, I would wake up in the morning and not be able to walk. I would have so much pain and inflammation from the knees down that I'd be hobbling to the shower. And I was doing everything I could do. I was working out. I was doing all the conditioning stuff for the program, dancing a lot and movement therapies, but I still was not able to move very well. And I was just overusing my body. And I was home for holiday and kind of complaining to my mom. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm so tight. I'm so restricted from the knees down. It just doesn't make any sense. And it hurts really bad.
Mhm.
And I just don't get it. And she was like, well, Trent, that's because you were born with cerebral palsy. And I was 19 when she told me this. And I thought, wow, like, wait, what?
Wow.
So, I didn't have like any label to say that I had cerebral palsy. So that was beautiful. But also it made a lot of sense once I really dived into researching what was going on in my body to cause the restriction.
Mhm.
And so I had a class 1 cerebral palsy, and that just means that it's a low level. So most people know cerebral palsy when you see it because somebody might have a marked gait or they use a walker that might be in a wheelchair. But there's different levels. And basically, to generalize and summarize, it's just having a head injury at birth. And that head injury can be in various severities and have different kinds of effects on how your body can move and operate. So for me, it wasn't very bad. But my mom was like, well, don't you remember when you were 3, they put casts on your legs? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of remember the casts. And they said, well, they put those on your feet, on your legs, because you didn't have any ankle mobility, and they had to force your heels down to the ground with these casts so that you could walk, on your whole foot instead of on the balls of your feet. I was like, wow, yeah, I do remember that. And that also explains why I have all these problems from the knees down, because that's where my restrictions were.
Mhm.
Well, that really became, especially as a college student, I had no money, I had no resources, I couldn't afford therapy. So as a college student, I was like, that was what started as really discovering how I can fix this for myself, because I'm going to keep dancing out. It was my goal to dance professionally, and I'm in school for it, and I'm on scholarship, and I've got to keep my scholarship and all this stuff. So I decided to just problem solve for myself. And over the course of a few months, I rehabbed my own injury just by trial and error, trying things that made it worse, things that made it better. And finding ways to build patterns that I could keep in my body that wouldn't just go away after a day,
Mhm, mhm.
And so that became just for me until I was asked to work with other people. And so I just was like, well, this is what I do. I don't really know what it is. I don't really have a name for it, but this is what I do. And so I would start helping other people with my work. And as time went on, it became clear as literature is being published about neuroscience and how the brain was plastic and the
Mhm.
relationship of the senses to stress and anxiety and movement abilities was like, I'm reading these books thinking that I'm going to be discovering something totally new and realizing that this is the work I've been doing for years. Like, this is where the work comes from. This is the science behind what I'd been doing for years. And so it was a beautiful moment, to discover, in a hard moment, to discover that there was a reason why I had such a limitation.
Mhm.
But to not have the label was beautiful, but also to be able to turn it into something that helps other people has really been my 25-year career.
Yeah, wow. And so, first question, I'm so surprised that your mother didn't say anything about that injury again, or about that just condition, especially choosing to be a dancer with, like, I guess kind of like the history that you had already with your feet. It never came up.
It never came up.
Wow,
And
that's incredible.
whether that, I've never asked her whether that was just like totally intentional or just she just didn't feel like it was necessary to talk about. I don't know. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I've never asked her
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, it was, I suppose it wouldn't have changed anything. I was very athletic, so I was what I would say like a master of compensation. Like, I didn't have to have the ability in my body technically, but I could just make it happen.
Mhm,
So I would just force my body, and that's why I got injured, because I was just forcing myself without
mhm.
proper technique and proper abilities in my body.
Mhm, mhm. And so then you were saying, that you had like this trial and error phase of trying out different things. And what was maybe one or two things that helped you the most during that process to really make that big
Yeah.
change?
Yeah, I realized in that process that it wasn't necessarily about the exercise that I was doing. It was
Mhm,
about how I was doing it. And that's really where the brain science comes in. So if we
mhm,
now know that the brain is plastic and it can change at any time.
mhm,
And so what I was playing with back then, without knowing the terms, was brain plasticity and building patterns that could stick. And so I would just pay attention to how I was doing exercises. And when I would do a certain amount of repetitions, a certain number of sets, a certain kind of frequency and intensity, that it would get better or get worse or stay the same. And as I was
mhm.
noting in my journals what was helping, I realized it was just the repetition and slowly nudging my abilities forward. Not making it so hard that it's impossible, not making it so easy that nothing changes, but finding that right level where I can repeat something over and over again to build new pathways, to build new skills around the movement that I needed.
Yeah, that's great. And so tell us a little bit more about, like, because you now basically created, in through all of these experiences, you created a program. I was just looking it up again, what it is called, and the Brain Speed Club, or also Fire Up Your Brain. Like,
Mhm.
how, tell us more about that process and how you get into it, in order to help
Yeah,
you shift.
that's a great question, because my origin story is like one line that I've shared with you, and there's another arm of this story
Okay.
that merged at some point, and that is that um, I remember when I was in third grade, my teachers were like, "Yeah, he doesn't read very well, so we need to give him something to help him with his reading because he's behind."
Mhm.
And so the solution was, oh, you don't read very well, so we're going to give you more reading. That thing that's really hard for you, we're going to double it up for you, and so that you have more reading to do. So it wasn't actually that I need literacy help. I could read. It was that, come to find out, my eyes didn't work very well together. And when
Mhm.
your eyes don't work well together, it's hard to read.
Mhm.
And it creates a lot of stress for the brain.
Mhm.
And so what I would do by the time I got to college is I would just read standing up first thing in the morning, because reading would put me to sleep. By the way, I would get like 3 sentences in and just totally nod off asleep.
Mhm.
And so I would have to get up early in the morning, stand and do my reading for my classes so I could get through it,
Mhm.
because I could comprehend it. I just couldn't physically accomplish the reading part because my brain would shut down. And so when I started to discover that this literature was just talking about how important the senses were in brain performance, I was like, I know that there's something going on with my eyes. I don't know exactly what it is. And I met a vision therapist that works and does exercises with eyes.
Mhm.
And in just a few minutes of exercises, it was this addition to my work that I was like, oh yeah, I need to do the same patterning I've been doing for the rest of my body for my eyes.
Hmm.
And it's got to be fun like it is for the rest of my body. Because when something is fun, your brain's like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll accept, I'll
Hmm.
accept this as something, a new skill to learn. And that's really where Fire Up Your Brain was born. And Fire Up Your Brain is just about making, like I said, brain performance fun and accessible. And we have programs for kids, for seniors, and for athletes because they need different things. They need different games.
Hmm. Hmm. And so it's basically a game to just make your brain performance better and like focus on whatever you want to focus on, or like tell us more about that, because you also
Yeah,
mentioned stress and anxiety. So I'm really
yeah,
curious to learn about that part as well. So, but let's maybe answer the first question first.
yeah, sure. So let me tell you about the game and how and kind of how it works, and we can talk about who we work with and how we might help each of those populations. That might help break that down for you.
Okay.
So we work with the BrainSpeed ball. So the BrainSpeed ball
Okay.
is an inflatable ball just like this that I created that has A through Z and 1 through 12 printed all over it. So
Okay.
if you and I were playing, we'd be throwing the ball back and forth. And
Uh-huh.
then what I'd ask you to do is to catch the ball and then tell me what you see. So as you caught the ball, you'd say, oh, I see a W. Then you'd
Mm-hmm.
throw it back to me. I'd throw it again. You'd say, oh, I see a 2. And you'd throw it back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing this does is it taps into how your brain is already programmed to process information.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sensing what's happening, you're deciding what to do about it, and then you act on it. So you're sensing the ball's coming towards you, you decide that you're going to catch it and say something out loud, and then you act on it by saying it out loud. So
Mm-hmm.
that sense, decide, act cycle that is already happening, we're just jumping into that cycle and reinforcing it.
Mm-hmm.
And because your brain really prioritizes information coming from your eyes, and this is a visual game, it's like a 1-2 punch in a
Mm-hmm.
really beautiful, positive way, because we up the strength of your senses. And by doing that, we can talk to the brain in a way that a language that it loves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. So you think of it like this. It's like for kids, they struggle with a lot with focus and sitting in front of a screen all day and sitting in the classroom all day, the
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and the pressures with performing at school and accomplishing what they need to accomplish. And by playing the game of BrainSpeed Ball and the games that are designed for kids so they can improve their focus, they can get the two sides of their brain to talk to each other,
Mm-hmm.
they can calm, they can self-regulate, because you don't have to have a partner. They could play by themselves against a wall. So it's a way to teach kids self-regulation, but
Mm-hmm.
it's because it's built into a fun game. We were not having a conversation of, oh, okay, there's something wrong with you, and here's this therapy to fix this thing that's wrong with you, right? So what we're doing is we're talking about what are some things that you love. How do you want to feel? What do you love to improve? So even though that kid might struggle with focus and anxiety, I'm going to find something that they love in their life. Like, oh, I really, I love to ride my bike. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, what do you want to improve? I want to ride my bike faster. Okay, let's time you. Let's ride your bike from A to Z and time you, and
Mm-hmm.
then play this game of brain speed ball, and
Mm-hmm.
then do it again and time you again. And we
Mm-hmm.
can in just a few minutes of playing, improve that speed.
Wow.
And so they get excited about what's possible and what gets unlocked from the ball without making it about there's a problem with them, and they have to see another therapist or another specialist that they just points out that they're less than, that they should be ashamed of who they are or what they're dealing with. So we
Mm-hmm.
put it on something that they love, and it sort of gets
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
secretly delivered to the issue that we're trying to deal with.
Yeah. That's super cool. And so, tell us more about the neuroscience behind that then. So, I assume that you've done some research, or like, you've probably collected data around this, because this sounds super interesting. Like, what is happening in the brain that then kind of helps them with the things that they're struggling with as well?
Yeah, so if you can think of it like this, that it's really been well documented that the eyes are an extension of your brain. They actually
Mhm.
like have a very strong sense that the eyes are like an extension of the brain. And so just like if you think about the rest of your body, if you have a weakness in your muscles, in your joints, and lack of coordination, then your body doesn't perform as well.
Mhm.
And the same thing is true with your eyes. And because the eyes are pretty much your brain, any disconnection, any disintegration, any weakness, imbalance is directly connected to how well the brain can take in information from your eyes. And because the brain is prioritizing information from your eyes, the stronger the eyes are, the better the information. And of course, that means that your brain doesn't have to work as hard. It's super efficient. It's really about brain efficiency. So I say brain performance, but brain efficiency is the bottom line. It's like, how efficient can we make the brain so that it's not overwhelmed?
Mhm.
So when we talk about stress and anxiety, we're talking about overwhelm. We're talking about too much information and
Mhm.
not processing.
Mhm.
So when you can get the brain to calm down because you're making it efficient and it can handle more, so therefore it doesn't feel stressed by the information that's coming at it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it almost sounds like you're getting the brain into a flow state or in like
Yeah.
gamma brain waves or right or any of these things in order to make it just flow better without kind of the distractions, right?
Yes, right, exactly. And the cool thing is that it's really about learning a new skill. So
Mhm.
it's a simple matter of learning how to play catch. If you can't catch the ball, the cool thing is you don't have to catch it. We could roll it to you. I
Okay.
have some of my senior clients that I just hand them the ball, and I
Uh-huh.
just pick different places to hand them the ball, and it still works the same way
Okay.
because they're still taking them through that same cycle, that same sense, decide, act. And when you're on that track, you can't be anywhere else.
Mhm.
All you can only be present with asking the brain to use your eyes, the top priority senses, track it, decide what to do about it, and say something about it. And so that's
Mhm.
the only place you can be, is right there. So it's
Mhm.
it's really powerful because you don't have to ask for their attention.
Mhm.
The game really pulls their attention to the task at hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about athletes because you said that you have
Yeah.
like seniors, athletes, and kids that you're using this with.
Yeah.
What would be a challenge that an athlete has, and like how would they use the ball in order to basically improve their performance? And then how often do they have to do it as well? Like, what's the frequency like? Do they just do it for a while and then they stop again because they're good, they're better, or is it
Yeah.
like a continuous learning?
So let's talk about frequency first, because the frequency is the
Okay.
same for everybody across the board.
Okay.
If you're really struggling with something, do it every day, twice a day. You're only playing for 5 minutes or less. This isn't a long activity. It's really quick. It could be
Uh-huh.
by yourself. It could be with a partner. So, but we do find that if you're having a really significant struggle, like you're trying to overcome an injury for an athlete,
Mhm.
or they're trying to increase their speed, or they're having repetitive stress issues with that as an athlete, then we might want to increase it and be more specific with how we're targeting the issues. So
Mhm.
for an athlete, for example, let's take a specific athlete to give you an example. So if we look at a baseball player, and if they get up to the mound and they're going to be hitting a ball, they have to be turning their head to a certain direction and looking with their eyes to find the ball to hit it and track it.
Mhm.
So we're already talking about mimicking their sport. So
Mhm.
for that baseball athlete, I'm going to have them stand in a similar posture that they would be playing their sport, whatever position or at bat that they're playing, and then run games that mimic the demand that's being put on their senses,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then help them find where the weaknesses are. Because
Mhm.
if a baseball player, it has weakness when their eyes go to the left as they're up to bat, it's going to be hard for them to track the ball and hit it properly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you'll see a baseball player that doesn't have a very good average and strikes out a lot, and they're an incredible athlete. They're strong, they're flexible, they're coordinated. They
Mhm.
don't need to be stronger. They probably, more than likely, need stronger senses. They need their eyes and their inner ear to be stronger so that their whole system is coordinated.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that's one example. For like a volleyball player, you look at how fast the game can go, how fast paced it is. So we look at building games that mimic their sport specifically. So we'll replace the volleyball with a BrainSpeed ball, hit it at the same speeds or even faster than they're used to playing, so
Mhm.
that they can really learn the skill of tracking the ball right to their platform, right to their body, right where they and know where it is in space, so
Mhm.
that when they get back to playing the game, there's not a threat of the speed, and they can track the ball easily and they can
Mhm.
respond quickly because they've built the patterns.
Mhm.
So for athletes, that becomes injury prevention and injury recovery as well. Really important.
Mhm. And do they also still call out what they see on the ball when they're
Yeah.
practicing with it?
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
you're still gonna call it out. And in fact, just to give you an example, that's one of the ways we can moderate the game. We can make the game easier or harder by what they call out. So
Mhm.
for example, some people, if they want to work with numbers, we can work with just the numbers and say, okay, every time you catch the ball, instead of saying the number you see, you're going to add it to the number you saw last time. So if you caught it and you caught a 2 and then you caught a 4, you wouldn't say 4, you would say 6. And then you would keep adding the numbers as you were catching it. So you'd have to remember what you had. So you have more cognitive skills built into it as well. So we can up the challenge that way. For our seniors, we'll a lot of times we'll pick like geography, like places around the world. So when they get a letter, then they have to come up with a place around the world that starts with that letter.
Okay. And since obviously my listeners are really into, managing stress and anxiety at work, like, can you give us a bit more of insights into what the ball could do for those people? Like how would I use it when I say, okay, I've been having, a lot of challenges either in my personal life or at work, and I'm feeling really stressed out and anxious. If I would listen to this for now, all of the information that we've shared so far with each other, I would be like, okay, I would play with the ball and my brain performance would improve, but then I would only do it for 5 minutes, or maybe 2 times 5 minutes, or maybe 2 times 15 minutes per day. But then, right, the stress and anxiety is in a way still there, or like maybe it's gone for those 15 minutes because I'm focused on something else, but then I go back to having all these problems to deal with. So how?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really a great question, because I want to give you an example of how long it can last, so that while you're playing, sure, that's going to be really useful, but it's what happens afterwards that can be surprising. So I'll use an athlete, but I'll bring it right back to an office worker, because it's very similar. Because I think people in an office are athletes. It's visual endurance, it's postural endurance. It is really demanding physically and mentally on the body to be in a cubicle or at a desk in an office all day long, every day. So there's a lot of parallels between an athlete and somebody who's in an office. But I had a gentleman who was in, he races motorcycles, and he was going 50 miles an hour on a track, lost control, and went headfirst into a cement wall. And broke like 22 bones, had a massive traumatic brain injury. And his wife brought him to me about 4 days after he was able to walk for the first time out of a wheelchair. He said how he would describe it is he had a drunk penguin walk, sort of like side to side, needed to hold on to the wall to kind of manage his balance and walk. And it's like, let's see what we can have happen. Let's see what happens when we play with the BrainSpeed ball and see what we can get to trigger for you. We played for about 10 minutes, and I had him walk, and he walked like there was nothing wrong, like a completely balanced walk, as if he had no injuries, no broken bones, no head injury. It was amazing. It still gives me goosebumps when I tell the story.
Yeah.
And of course, he went home to his family and said, look what I can do. Look what's going on. And I'm like, well, that's really great. But what about tomorrow when you wake up, when it goes away? Like, what are you going to do then? And so he woke up the next day and it didn't go away. And it never went away. He kept his new way of walking, this healthy way, permanently, because it was so powerful. It got him out of this trauma and out of this stress and into a healthier, more efficient brain cycle that he could perform in his body better. And he could go back to work full time. It's amazing. So when you look at the office worker, they're sitting, and the postures, as they get fatigued, it goes way down because they're getting tired, and their visual field is being concentrated to this really small section. So they're getting overworked in a specific angle of their eyes. And so when you get the ball out and you bounce it off the wall and you stand up and you're moving around, you number one, undo what you've been working and doing so hard, sitting in stillness for so long. But the other thing is you're just reminding your brain the power of this movement and the power of the information from the eyes, and you're balancing out how the information is going into the brain. It's not just at a screen, this small sense, it's the whole spectrum, and it creates relaxation. And it creates relaxation afterwards as well. Now, I have one at every desk that I work at. It's not a coincidence that it's here. It's every desk that I work at, because I'm the same way. I'm working at a computer. I'm working on whatever I'm doing, and I'm staring at a screen. Even if I've got blue light blocking glasses on, I'm still staring at a screen for hours. And it gets to a point where I have to go, okay, I got to shut this down and just get myself into a healthier place. And when I come back to my work, it's like, oh yeah, that feels like me. I feel better going back into my space. And so I think better. I even emotionally feel better about it. So,
Mhm.
if you're someone that struggles with anxiety on a regular basis, then you build a practice like you would anything else. You
Mhm.
don't drink water when you're thirsty and then you never drink water again. You drink it all the time so you can maintain your hydration. So
Yeah.
if you're someone that needs support with your anxiety or stress, same thing. You build a practice, and that's one of the best skills you could learn is building a stress and a resilience practice, so
Yes.
that before it gets overwhelming, you have a way to detect, like, you know what, I need to just settle this a little bit and come back to what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
it's a good way to do that.
I love that comparison with the water and that you're just building a practice. That's awesome. So tell us more about how you came to create the ball. Like how did that
Yeah.
occur to you that you like created that? That's so
Well, I worked for just a short while with a vision therapist, and um, there was like vision wands and charts and things, and it was like um, it was effective, but it was also really boring. And I'm really like an 8-year-old inside. I'm like, I need it to be fun, and most of our brains do need it to be fun. That we need
Mhm.
it to be fun because the brain loves things that are fun, and it
Mhm.
will listen and it will cooperate and engage when things are fun.
Mhm.
And the only thing I could find with a ball is they had like this little hard ball on a string that they would swing from the ceiling. I was
Mhm.
like, this is just like really boring and not colorful. And I can't imagine like sitting down with my clients and having them do this. And so I just started making my own BrainSpeed ball. I just would take a ball and I would draw letters and numbers and various objects on it,
Okay.
and just start playing around with how to use that with my clients. And what I realized is that I got really tired of reinforce like going over it with Sharpie over and over again, because it wears off and it smudges and it kind of gets on your hands and stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but when I went to actually like manufacturing the ball itself, um, we did a lot of research into orange. Happens to be my favorite color, but it happens to be a very high contrast color.
Mhm.
And so the high contrast helps us work across a lot of populations. So
Mhm.
people that have a really hard time with like visual acuity, being able to see clearly,
Mhm.
it's really good. It's large enough that you can see it from a great distance. So it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be something so small that you have to have amazing vision to see it.
Mhm.
Um, for kids learning their letters and numbers for the first time,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. We have
Yeah.
them like catch the ball and like trace it, and then the teacher can tell them what it is, and they can say it back. Kids can sit in a circle and roll it back and forth. They kind of get excited, like, "What did you get? What did you get?" And they trace it and they say it out loud.
Yeah.
Um, but also just the ability to adjust the air in the ball. Because one of the
Mhm.
things we find with some of our clients that have neurological disease or conditions where they can't grab a ball, that maybe they don't have two hands they can use at the same time, but they have
Mhm.
one, we'll take half the air out. And this allows us to do that. And they can catch it with one hand. And it's kind
Mhm.
of deflated. And they can play the same game, have the same fun, and get that same brain cycle going.
So interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And when did you create that ball? How long ago was that?
So I started making this one about 3 years ago, but
Okay.
there was a few years before I actually manufactured it that I
Mhm.
was making my own and teaching, other professionals how to make their own.
Yeah. Like sitting there with the ball and just like putting it
Yeah.
on with a marker.
Yeah. And it worked when, if that's all you have, it works, but it is messy. The marker gets everywhere. It gets on your hands, it gets on your clothes. So
Yeah.
it really needed to be something that wasn't going to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And so you said that you just launched a new program for kids,
Yeah.
with the ball as well, I assume?
Yeah. So it's Fire Up Your Brain for kids. And
Mhm.
it is um, a very digestible program in the sense that you're not sitting for hours to learn how to do this stuff. It is you learn, there's main core games that are specifically targeted for kids. So
Mhm.
games that are to help kids with focus, games that help kids get the two sides of the brain to talk to each other. So we're talking about crossing the midline of the body,
Mhm.
and that helps coordination and anxiety and stress and all the things that come with that. But also, giving parents and teachers and tutors and programs a resource that's affordable and that's fun, that
Mhm.
they can get, you know, access to really easily. And also, you know, not make it, like I said before, that it's this hard, big therapy thing where, for parents that are finding solutions for their kids, it's expensive. Like taking them to various therapists is expensive,
Mhm.
and you put a lot of hope into the finding the right answer, and you could spend a lot of money and have very little results. And so this is a way to make this really accessible and affordable. And also know that if you're in the program, you're also not alone. So I have this thing I do every month called AskTrent. And when you're in the program, you can actually just shoot me questions you might have. And then when I go live, I answer those questions so that you're not totally on your own going, oh, I hope I'm doing this right. If you have a question, you can actually ask me the question. Then that's something that I'll share with our greater audience as well.
Yeah. And what's your vision for this, for just like people with brain injuries or with, difficulties focusing and being stressed? Because obviously it becomes more and more of a problem. And I wonder like what your plan is for the future of how to make it more accessible for people.
I want to help people understand that having a practice is an essential solution. It's part of your life. Just like everything else, it's a part of your life. You have a practice that helps with stress and anxiety and overwhelm as a part of your life, because those things aren't going away. We're not going to get less stress tomorrow. If anything, it'll be more stress tomorrow. So having a way to combat that in a positive way is essential. But my greater vision is that we continue to build out programs for specific populations and package up the games that are specific to your particular situation. Really soon, I'm excited about, we're going to be bringing in about 300 professionals that I've been working with for over the years as coaches. So they'll be accessible and you'll be able to find a coach near you on our website.
Oh, cool.
And I'm really excited about that, because these are talented professionals that do this work, that have trained with me, that have trained for years, that know how to work with someone's body and brain. And that can be hard to find. So this is a way to help people be able to find somebody near them. And after that, we are looking for some strategic partnerships with some organizations that we can find ways to give back and multiply the impact we're having, so that this work gets into more of the hands of the people that need it.
Yeah. And have you done a lot of research on like really what happens in the brain? Because I'm still very curious about like what kind of signals it sends to the brain that even after 10 minutes with like that visual cue helps you be in such a more efficient state, or helped your client, for example, work again more properly. Like what is really happening in such a short period of time that we are not able to trigger with any other therapies or
I think honestly, we are much more dysregulated than we realize. Even when we feel like we're regulated, I think we have a lot more dysregulation than we realize. And when you are engaging in something that creates a repeated regulation pattern, that's tapping into that cycle, that sense, decide, act cycle that's already happening in your brain, you're reinforcing how we're designed to function. So you're out here functioning like this with this overwhelm and stress and not tapping into that cycle. So when you tap into that cycle, it's like a homeostasis. It's that simple. It just brings you to homeostasis. Now, from a chemical and a neuron perspective, part of my vision is to have people that are passionate about doing that kind of research that can provide the double-blind studies and organize things like that, because it'd be beautiful to be able to give that data in really clear ways. I've got hundreds of stories. I have stories of every kind of population. And we know from looking at the research that exists that we absolutely are accurate in what we're doing. But in terms of having the research done with the ball, that's coming. And I'm actually really pumped about that, because there are people that do that for a living. That's what they do, is research. And so I do feel like with as much as we know about neuroscience, we're just getting started. We're just scratching the surface, even though it feels like there's a lot. And I actually plan on being a part of how we develop that and how we reveal what's really going on and make that accessible as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because I always feel like once you have data, then, people are they pay so much more attention, right? Like those stories are all like great, but then I feel like almost when you can start to explain what exactly the brain is doing and how it kind of organizes itself, then, I think you will get more attention. And then, I think it's like those two parts of like understanding the information and then understanding the how, in order to be able to replicate it, will be such an incredible insight for you. Are you aware of Joe Dispenza's work?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I love Joe Dispenza. I'm a huge fan. My podcast listeners are probably like, here she goes again. She's talking about Joe Dispenza again. But he talks all about neuroplasticity and, how to rewire the brain. And that made me a lot think of him when you told us about how the speedball works and what it does, because I'm like, okay, Joe Dispenza actually describes this in a very complex way, but what you're doing is actually so simple. So if we could help people from an emotional mental health standpoint to really get out of these unhealthy patterns of how they're thinking and feeling into something more positive, I think that would be huge. So I'm really curious to see if you're not going to continue your work and research on kind of that area as well.
Yeah, it really is really about having the research that reveals and shows the data on what's happening. I mean, we know that science already has shown us that when you train the senses, when you make your senses stronger, that you have better brain performance. So there isn't a sense of having to prove that that's real. What I definitely want to show is like, okay, how can I make an athlete faster? What happened to make them faster?
Yeah.
What happened in this athlete, but what happened in that athlete? What happened in this senior to improve their balance? What happened in that senior to improve their balance? Like that, those are the questions that I have that I hope we discover, because we know that stronger senses equals stronger brain performance. That's well documented. That's literature that's been published. And we're tapping into that. But, the more questions we can ask and the more details we can collect, then I think the better off we are, and it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited as well, because I feel like, we're talking so much about meditation and sitting down and closing our eyes and breathing and like rewiring the brain that way, but I think the way of how you are planning to do this is so much more fun with the ball, and like it's just more action, and it's such more an active approach, and much simpler approach as well. So yeah.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite clients that I was ever able to work with, he had pretty severe dementia. And so for him, playing with the BrainSpeed ball was all about regulation and mood. So we, in a session, his sessions with me were about an hour, and we get to a certain point where he was frustrated and overwhelmed and would become very outspoken and sometimes belligerent in his behavior because of how frustrated he was, and he couldn't communicate well because the dementia just made it very challenging. And so I get out the ball, and like a minute into playing catch, he's smiling and laughing and challenging me, and it just totally pushed the needle to the other side of the spectrum. So I know that research is going to be a really valuable component to this. I really do, because some people really need to hear and see what those data points are. But I also know when I watch somebody in their 80s with severe dementia who's not smiling in their day smile and laugh for the first time that month, it's so powerful. So I know we're onto something, and I also look forward to seeing what else we can discover, because I'm not here to say that I have all the answers, and I don't think any of us should be in that position. I think it's much more exciting to go, what can we discover? What other questions can we ask? What can we pull out that we don't know?
Yeah, for sure. So if anyone is interested to buy a BrainSpeed ball, where can they best buy one?
So you go to fireupyourbrain.com.
Okay.
And you can find the program for kids right now. And the program for kids comes with the ball. So if you purchase that program, we get a ball sent to you right away, so you can start using it as soon as possible.
Okay. And then do you just use the ball however you want, or are there, like you said, there's a program, so there's like different techniques on how to play with it, right?
Yeah, the program's going to guide you through how to use the ball, and so it's going to give you the basics of what makes a game successful, and it's really easy. But then also I'm going to give you different games to play. So if you're not someone who's creative at first to come up with your own games, I'm going to give you really good games and clear instruction with a high schooler, actually, so you can see another kid playing and get the instruction and the details that way. But then also we give instruction in how to build your own game. We actually have this really great checklist of picking off like what room you're in, and you're playing by yourself or with a partner or with a relative, and how fast is it going to be? Is it one ball? Is it two balls? Like, so you can kind of have a recipe card for coming up with your own game. So you're very much walked through the process. And in the end, I hope that kids and parents alike are inspired and empowered to come up with their own games. This isn't about like doing exactly what I tell you to do, but
Yeah.
definitely come up with your own games. The best games are the ones that like kids are like, look what I can do. And they get on a hoverboard and they're playing against a wall. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that, you know?
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah. And so what do you play with your kids? I think you said you
Oh
you
yeah.
have kids.
Oh, yeah, I have two kids. Yeah. And they've used the ball since I started making my own for sure.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, and helping them with focus and concentration and regulation.
Mhm.
And they play on their own as well. And it's really such an easy tool that we don't have to have a big fight or a big like let's do this thing.
Mhm.
It's like so often with kids, it's like you've got to do your like you got this tear off sheet from the doctor. We got to do your exercises or we got to do your therapy or whatever it is, and it's like kind of like an
Mhm.
arm wrestle.
Mhm.
Um, and the program for kids is really designed just to make it really easy, as easy as possible for your kids to use it with or without you, if that's not a possibility, because some parents and kids don't have that relationship where they can do the game together, and it's fine. You don't have to.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some of the best stories are parents that got the game for themselves, they got a ball for themselves, and the kids stole it. And they're like, I got it for me, but my daughter stole it. you know, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that is really fun. And so you play with your kids on a day-to-day basis, and do you use it for yourself? You mentioned earlier that when you're sitting at your desk and you need like a break or you feel like you're starting to be overwhelmed, you kind of get into that as well.
Oh, for
But
sure.
do you feel like now, after so many years working on this and all the experiences you've had, do you feel like, like for example, the pain that you've been experiencing from your knees down or even like your eyes, is that like completely healed, or is that still something that you're challenged with on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I don't have the pain. I don't have the kind of
Okay.
restriction and pain. I have some tightness because, I had a really severe restrictions. Now I
Mhm.
have moderate restrictions. I don't
Mhm.
have that kind of pain anymore, which is awesome.
Mhm.
With the thing with the eyes is that because my eyes can work well together now, I don't have near the struggle with reading that I
Mhm.
had because my eyes work well together.
Mhm.
I definitely use the ball when I'm stressed or overwhelmed, or if I'm tired of looking at a screen and my eyes have
Mhm.
been fixated on this little point that I've been doing, to
Mhm.
get my eye range of motion expanded, get my body to move for sure. And that's something that I do on a regular basis. I also love to mountain bikes or like trail ride. And so I play the ball before I go out and get on my bike,
Mhm.
because you're looking at, talk about visual input and head
Mhm.
movement and balance and
Mhm.
coordination. So playing with the
Mhm.
ball before that just gets me primed for it. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's about recovery from something and unlocking new doors, but sometimes it's about priming your body for what you're about to go do,
So
warming up.
yeah, I might need to get one. I'm doing a lot of mountain biking and surfing, and
Oh,
so yeah, I think that would be super interesting to see how that changes things.
and what's fun is if you have an activity that you love, it's fun to do a before and after test. So it's
Mhm.
like go do an activity for however long you want to do, like say like 10 minutes or something. Go ride your bike for 10 minutes,
Mhm.
then play the ball for 5 minutes, and then get on your bike again, and
Mhm.
just check in with yourself and what do you notice,
Mhm.
and then fill in the answer, fill in the blank to that question, and you might notice more balance, that it feels easier, you don't feel as fatigued.
Mhm.
It might even feel crisper. Your vision might feel crisper and clearer, so you can see things coming. Your peripheral vision might be bigger. You
Mhm.
just can explore. On your surfboard, your balance could improve.
Yeah,
So if you get one, let me know. We'll jump on and
I
make sure that
know.
you got it.
Yeah.
You got all the skills you need, because it's a fun to do before and after test. That's really where like your immediate research is. That's where you say like, oh, okay, I could run this fast. I played. Now I can run faster. Wow. Okay. Well, I might not know what chemicals are being released in my brain, but I know it makes me faster. So I'm going to keep doing it because it makes me
Mhm.
faster, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, especially on a surfboard, all the balance and coordination, and, your eyes have got to be spot on to make that work too. So
Yeah. Yeah,
that'd
for
be fun.
sure. Yeah, that will be fun. All right. Cool. Well, Trent, this was super, super interesting. Thank you so much for your time.
My
I think
pleasure.
we shared everything. So we shared the website on where they can find the ball and the programs. But if you have any other links that you want me to add to the show notes, let me know, and I'll definitely add anything to the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. This was super, super inspiring.
It's my pleasure. It was really fun.